Pastor Justin. I'm here with another Snapshots from the Bible, and I'm glad you're joining with me today. We're going to talk about kind of an unusual topic for the holiday season, but it's one I think that comes up for a lot of people, and that's the topic of grief. Because grief hits hard during the holidays, especially when you're missing a loved one or you have memories of even, years and years past of somebody that you loved and you got to spend the holiday season with. And Christmas turns from this time of joy to a time of grief. And you just have that pang of loss that kind of comes up in the middle of it. And so as I was thinking of that, I had seen this famous painting by Oscar, I have to look up the name, Swincher, Oscar Swincher. And he painted this painting called Grief in 1898. I won't share it with you. There's a little bit of nudity in it, but it's artistic nudity. It's a man who is huddled over the dead body of his wife, and on his back is this gigantic stone, and the stone is being pressed down by this very creepy skeletal figure, and it's just pushing down on his back as he weeps over his wife. And it's just a very good visual representation of what grief does. It crushes you. It's a crushing force, and it doesn't quite ever completely go away. And if we look to the Bible when we're struggling with grief, and especially that question of why, and often we don't get the answer to that. Why, God? Why did you take this person that I loved? Why them and not me? When we go to the topic, maybe that's not the right question. But we need to go to the Bible and see that grief is addressed. And of course, you go to Job. Job is one of the great, not the only, but one of the great sources of wrestling with this question of grief. And that's where I think a lot of us, when we approach Job, we kind of look at the very beginning of it and the very end of it, and we get a broad sense of it. But when you read through the book, a vast majority of it is just Job and his friends wrestling with this issue of why does God allow suffering? Why does God inflict people with suffering? And Job struggling with his own grief. And one thing I don't want us to forget is that on top of Job struggling with the suffering of, being afflicted with disease all over his body, with having all of his wealth and possessions taken away, chapter 1 tells us that his sons and daughters were all killed when Satan caused a building to collapse on top of them. I can't imagine losing not just one family member, but a lot of them all at once. And that kind of grief is just never ending. So I want to share with you a passage from Job 6, and especially if over the holidays or just in general, you've been silently, quietly tackling with this question of grief in your life. Listen to what Job says, because I think you'll find a lot of relatability here. This is especially at the beginning of his kind of grief cycle, where it says, Job replied, "If only my anguish could be weighed and all my misery placed on the scales, it would surely outweigh the sand of the seas. No wonder my words have been impetuous. The arrows of the Almighty are in me. My spirit drinks in their poison. God's terrors are marshaled against me. Does the wild donkey bray when it has grass? Does an ox bellow when it has fodder? Is tasteless food eaten without salt? Is there flavor in the sap of the mallow? I refuse to touch it. Such food makes me ill. Oh, that I might have my request, that God will grant me what I hope for, that God will be willing to crush me, to lose his hand and cut off my life. Then I would still have this consolation, my joy in unrelenting pain, that I had not denied the words of the Holy One." I think in this passage we see so much about Job. First of all, this naked honesty of what grief is, that he's going through this. He doesn't brush it aside. He doesn't say, oh, well, it's all has a purpose. I understand it. It's all good. He doesn't understand it. He's wallowing in what he calls unrelenting pain. That stone of grief is crushing down on him. And in fact, his request to God is, God, just please kill me. Just put me out of my misery right now. that at least I won't curse you. At least I would know I have ended my life having only praised you and not turned against you, because maybe he's even terrified if he continues on that the grief will turn him against God. I don't think so, but there's always these fears. There's always these worries we have. But he says this misery is so great he can't even measure it. And I'm sure he's thinking of his baby girls and his baby boys as he's raised them up and as he loved them, and that one day that they're all just taken away from him all at once. And he'll have that grief even at the end of the book when God restores his fortune, when Job goes on with his life. Grief will always still be there. But you see that even in the midst of grief, this man's faith was tremendous. That he loves God, even as he thinks that God is against him, and that's a false assumption there, that he still loves God so much, and he follows God that he doesn't want to turn against his holiness. So even in the midst of our grief, I think we can still we can still turn to God. He is still sovereign. He is still Lord. He is still good. He still has his eye on you. You may not understand. You may not even like him all that much during these times. But he is your God. He is the Holy One. And he loves you, even in your grief. Remember, when Lazarus died and his family were in pain and in grief, Jesus wept. Even knowing that Lazarus was going to be resurrected, Jesus wept. He weeps for you. God bless. Have a good day.